all want to make money by doing something we love. If you could turn your hobby into your job, you'd never work a day in your life, right? Welcome to Hobby Hustle, the ultimate podcast where collecting passion and business collide. Now, here's your host, Zach Nygett.
Welcome to episode 25 of Hobby Hustle. I'm your host, Zach Nygett, and I greatly appreciate you taking time to spend with us. If this is your first time, welcome. But no matter if you're a new member or you've been listening for a bit, please be sure to like, subscribe, rate us, and of course, share with your friends. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment to share any thoughts or suggestions that you have. I greatly appreciate your support, and I hope you enjoy today's show. Today's guest is a visual artist, musician, and writer. His work in its various forms has been published in the New York Times, Rolling Stone, GQ, Vanity Fair, The Athletic, Sports Illustrated, and more. As a musician, he has 3 critically acclaimed studio albums, and as a visual artist, he's created award-winning cartoons for The New Yorker since 1999. In 2021, Topps released Spotlight70, a 70-card set of his ink and watercolor paintings of baseball cards pulled from their archives. Topps loved the project so much that in 2022, they released Spotlight70 II, and in 2024, Spotlight Baseball, both of which sold out quickly. You can find him on Instagram at Sunday Friedman or his website, andyfriedman.net. I'm honored to welcome a collector, talented visual artist, and musician, Andy Friedman, to the show. Andy, my friend, welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Zach. I'm doing great. How you doing?
Man. Very good. Well, we are excited to have you. I'm looking forward to diving into this. I try to do some prep on our conversations, so I make sure I sort of cover all my bases with all my guests. But I came across something unique with you, which was a pair of 101 sneakers you did for Aaron Boone. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. I guess I got a call from Brandon Steiner, and who set that up. And it was a Father's Day broadcast. He wanted to wear something special. I was flattered that they reached out. I did a Boone family portrait on both the shoes. So it was, dad, grandpa, brothers, all the Boones on both shoes. And he wore them. And Michael Kay gave it some love. They talked about it in between innings or something. It was really, really exciting.
Yeah, that's really super cool. I just thought that was like so unique, man, because I know it's sort of out of your wheelhouse of some of the other stuff you've done, and how cool. And then if I'm correct, those went to like auction for a charity or something. Was that right?
Something like that. Yeah. The fun part actually was handing them over. We met like at a rest stop somewhere on the thruway, and so we're like in the back corner of some parking lot, taking some pictures and the thing. And then he gets in his car, he drives away. And there was a guy, I guess, like waiting for his partner or something in the car who saw the whole thing and like was like, what are you doing here? And that was kind of special, a little bit behind the scenes moment. But
that's awesome, man. Right place, right time.
Then it inspired me to create a pair of Andy Van Slikes that I made on my own on a pair of Vans.
Awesome.
So, have those as well.
Very cool. I'll have to check those out if you rock them at a show at some point.
Yeah. They were fun.
That's great, man. Well, very cool. Well, so, hey, with all my guests, I like to sort of start at the beginning from a collector standpoint. So I'm curious, can you take me back to sort of how you got into sports and collecting and some of those early memories?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my first packs of cards that I ever acquired were bought by my dad when I was in 2nd grade. I would accompany him on his errands on a Sunday. And as a reward, I think we ended up in the smoke shop. He was smoked cigars and pipes, and they sold packs of 82 Fleer in there. We didn't really watch baseball. I didn't grow up watching baseball when I was that young.
Yeah.
My mom's favorite player was Thurman Munson. She watched like in the 70s. My grandpa was a big fan, whatever. So these didn't mean too much to me, but I liked the way they looked. I remember that. It was just I didn't know any of the players. But that's sort of how it started, and I would draw on them. I would cut out the borders. I would do things to kind of like make them my own. They didn't have any value to me in any way. So it wasn't until and then a couple of years later, Garbage Pail Kids came out.
Heck yeah!
And that's actually by that point I was already collecting WWF cards. So that was really and wacky packages. I liked wacky packages. Back when I was might even be around the same time, second grade or something like that. So that's sort of how I got into it. So oddly enough, it's really the art angle that got me into cards. I never would have dreamed that this is where I'd end up. But it wasn't until the Mets won the World Series in '86. That's my hometown. I grew up on Long Island. That's what got me into baseball and also collecting, because now there was purpose. It's like, hey, let's collect all the Mets.
Yeah.
Trade your Rafael Santana for Danny Heap. So that's kind of how I got into it. And at the same time, what really got me into, so that's what got me into watching, I got like Mets fever. But at the same time, I spent my summers in the Poconos, and the local team were the Phillies. So Schmidt won MVP that year. I think that was my first year of Little League. I got so swept up into it that I struck out every at bat. And
you and me both, buddy.
Yeah, I think I got beamed between the shoulder blades on one pitch. I've reached once on a hit by pitch, and probably was walked a few times. I got a Wade Boggs Louisville slugger bat, and literally would eat chicken before games to do everything.
Try to get his juju into you. Yeah,
get everything I could. It was terrible. But when I learned that Mike Schmidt had a terrible rookie season and struck out a lot, it really pointed me to kind of like the story on the back of the cards that are told in numbers, but each of those cards is like a novella. And the way that would read was so inspiring to me, to see all these zeros and then, or hundreds of strikeouts. And then the next year you see all the italicized and bold league leaders. And it's like, oh, you really can bounce back, in life. But it also plays that, really the metaphor is so alive in sports. And that's what I always loved. People ask if I'm a fan of baseball. Of course I am, but I always say I'm a fan of the wisdom of the game. Yeah, it's applicable. You get older, you can't play as hard as you did when you were younger, but you can in real life, and you can use the same lessons that you learned on the field. And when I was a Little League coach, that's the thing that I really wanted to impart to the kids the most. Like, you might not play baseball, but I hope you do in real life wherever you go. So that's sort of how I got into baseball and the card thing. Beautiful artifacts of art, whether they were painted Garbage Pail Kids or the traditional cards. I just saw them as beautiful relics, which totally. I think a lot of us have that in common.
100%, man. And I mean, it's fitting, right? Like, that's definitely led you down a path. And I know you've had zigs and zags, and we'll get into that a little bit, just as a creative person, but it's cool. And I'm with you, man. Right. Like, just the packs themselves, the cards themselves, like a lot of that vintage baseball, basketball, football stuff. There's just so much beauty there, and not that the new cards aren't cool, right? But those old school cards, there's something about them that just resonates sort of with the soul.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, the way they're worn, people love the Gem Mint 10s, but to me, there's nothing like a crumpled up old card from the 50s that, these are like war vets that should be, put on a pedestal, not like kicked to the curb. That's how I see it. Totally. I look at a Gem Mint 10 sometimes and I'm like, what would you ever accomplish in your life?
You've sat pristine your entire life. I love it.
Like, what'd you ever do?
That's awesome.
Privileged
really
life cool. That you have. Give me that crumpled Mickey Mantle. I have a Mickey Mantle I bought at the Burbank Card Show a few years ago and walked it over to get encapsulated. I thought it would be fun to, it was like literally falling apart. So I kind of wanted to put it in a slab, and nobody would slab it. They all were worried it would literally disintegrate. And I feel like, I think that might be more rare than an 8, 9, or a 10.
Totally.
A Mickey Mantle turned away by PSA. I was like, that's like for a collector like me, that's the equivalent of a Gem Mint 10. Ungradable.
Right. Yeah, that's the 101. No, it's funny you say that, though, because I had EJ Ferrer on here earlier, and like one of his prized possessions is this Kobe rookie that's a PSA 1. And he's like, dude, I love it. Like, this is my card, man. So there's definitely a lot to be said about the sentimental value more than just the condition value. So
for sure. Yeah, but to each their own. Right?
Totally. 100%. Yeah. Well, that's the beauty about this whole collectible space. Whatever it might be, we do it all our own way, and we're doing it because it's something that we love. So speaking about that, like, do you have any sort of stuff in your collection these days, or your collection's evolved a little bit, or you're just picking up things you like?
Yeah, I just pick up things I like. Whenever I see a crumpled something that speaks to me, they find me. I like to say, I don't.
Sure.
go out hunting looking for a particular card. Very rarely. I don't think I ever would have got I don't think I was looking for a 1953 Ralph Kiner, but then when I see it, it's like I must have that, So that, and every show I buy things, always, every show I do. I'm on both sides of the coin there. That's why it's so exciting for me. I'm not just behind, in my booth. I get to go to card shows also.
Right. Yeah.
So it's
no, the thrill of the hunt, right? Like that's what makes them so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, shifting gears sort of toward the business side, I think a lot of people, know you from the Topps baseball product, but you're an extremely talented and creative person outside of just your cards. And you've produced a lot of music. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of the musical career and background?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I didn't touch a guitar till I was 30 years old. I never sang a note in my life until the recording session was happening for my first album, which was about 9 months after I picked up a guitar for the first time. Getting into country and country blues music, it empowered me to give it a try, because you don't have to you shouldn't go to Juilliard to study that stuff.
Yeah.
Most of the early practitioners of that music, didn't know how to read and had 5 minutes off a day to, get in touch with their own feelings and create something as a, escape from their very difficult lives. So it empowers you to be simple. And really the achievement in that kind of music, I guess what Johnny Cash said, 2 chords and the truth. It's the truth is the hard part. So it really challenges you to be emotionally bare. And as a, classically trained painter of, really difficult Renaissance oil painting techniques, I would spend almost 3 years on a particular painting just to get it, perfect. It was an experiment in me about embracing the other side, embracing imperfection. Just getting up, being willing to fail in public. As an oil painter, for me, it was all about, why did it take 3 years? Because I painted it how many times over and over until I got it right. You can't do that when you're up on stage, and you can't do that in watercolor either. We can get into that, but yeah, I wanted to, it was like a dare. Being a musician was a dare for me, a personal dare. And, the first time I had to play, in the land of the actual country blues, where in the South, it was made me really nervous, because these people weren't embodying the spirit of the music, they were it. And I felt man, if I'm not doing this for real, they're gonna know.
Totally.
And am I doing this for real? And I was sure I was. And so I took a deep breath and just said what I had to say, however I'm able to say it. And that's what it's all about.
Totally. Yeah. You can't go wrong with being authentic. Right. And I think that comes through in your music. And, you and I sort of had chatted offline about, there was a recent piece you posted on Instagram about the postcards from people who had passed. And that really resonated. But to your point, just the simplicity and the feeling that came through in just that short clip was really powerful, man. So that was really cool.
Oh, thanks. That's cool. Well, I haven't written any songs in about 13, 14 years. And so suddenly, I don't know, suddenly something's hit me, and I've been working on a bunch of new songs. So when I was a musician, it was pre-Instagram.
Yeah, totally.
It was. I was traveling around. Well, before I was a musician, I was what they called a slideshow poet. I wanted to have the life of a musician and reach the people through my art in the spaces where they are. And that's the beautiful thing about being a musician. You rely on your albums, you leave something behind, and your live performance, but you don't ask them to come to you. You go to their town.
Mm-hmm.
In the art world, I felt where's that? So I created a performance around my visual pieces, where I kind of offered what I called the lyrics to the music of the pictures. So it wasn't a lecture, it wasn't a presentation. It wasn't now here's a painting of a train. I might be, offering poetic verse that has nothing to do with the train, but it would come together. And I was if a musician can transfix a room full of rowdy drunks, then why can't a painter? And so sometimes I could, and sometimes I couldn't.
Sure.
But, I was out there for 5 years doing that before I even picked up a guitar. Then I hired a band because I started listening to Hank Williams, Luke the Drifter. When he recorded for MGM, he would do spoken. He had a couple of spoken albums. MGM was worried that he'd lose his audience, so they made him have a pseudonym, and that's where Luke the Drifter came from. But it's actually Hank Williams, and he's got a country band playing behind him. And I thought, these spoken readings are a lot more accessible to the listener when there's music in the background. So I hired a band to travel around with me. Although at first I would call ahead to the venues and I'd say, do you know any mandolin and guitar and bass players who might be able to just hop on stage with me? We would rehearse for a second in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Eventually I thought it would, easier if I travel with my own band. And I did that, and it did help that performance a little bit. And they sort of encouraged me to pick up a guitar and strum along. Before I knew it, I was kind of singing my poems, and somebody said once, like, those pictures on the screen are really distracting the people from your songs. And I'm like, what songs? And then I thought, wait a second, that's kind of cool. Actually, if you take away the pictures, then the songs are like projected in the mind of the listener. And that's all music was for me. I never identified as a musician. It's like some painters give up the paint and the brush and they make like, sculptures out of light or whatever they're doing, laser beams or wax on the floor, whatever it is. I thought, oh, well, I'll make paintings out of, vibrations from cat guts in a wooden box and warbles with my voice, but it's the words and the delivery that's going to ultimately paint the picture. So that's sort of like how I thought of myself. My last record was called Laser Beams and Dreams, and I was lucky enough to record that with two amazing musicians, David Goodrich and Stefan Crump, and they were the ones that encouraged me to identify as a musician. And so since they insisted I was one, I decided to let them convince me that I was, and so I guess this would be really like my first time writing songs as, a songwriter, a musician, so I'm having kind of fun. That's what that postcards. So we actually inherited a box of old postcards, and from like 1908, 1910. And
Crazy.
just like the ordinary things that people wrote back then, it's beautiful. Hey, it's like finding a box of emails.
Yeah, totally. Go back through them. Well, it was cool that it inspired you. And like I said, it left an impression. I'm working on a project outside of the hobby and everything else that has to do with death and leaving messages for your loved ones when you pass. And so, that, like I said, really, really resonated with me. But cool. Speaking of being creative and other inspirations that you find, in addition to being a musician and a visual artist, you've also done writing and sort of cartoon work that's been recognized for the New Yorker. Can you tell the audience a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, let's see. 1999. I was living in an auto body garage. I figured like out on Long Island, I was $150. I'd sold actually when I was in college. So I played softball pretty religiously, and I made portraits of the guys I played softball with and superimposed them into Topps baseball.
Oh, cool. Okay. Awesome.
And so like after I graduated, I kind of like needed some money, and these guys, were like, hey, could you make me in a 1984 Topps? Can you make me in an 85? So if you're going to do the same thing I'm doing now.
I was going to say that's the inspiration for it all. Yeah.
Well, no, it goes way back before that. I've been doing stuff like that my whole life. So this is just a stop along the way. But yeah, made enough money with those sales to like, justify renting a studio space in Long Island for $150 a month. I was 9 months before I ran out of money. I thought, a painter, all you really need to do is paint. So whatever. But I ran out of money and had no communication to the outside world. And a friend of mine from college, I went to the Rhode Island School of Design. He had a job at the New Yorker in the mailroom, and there was an opening. Actually, okay, so I needed a job, so I started working at the farmers market in Union Square in Manhattan. Got a couple of times a week, getting there at 5:30 in the morning to leaving at 8 at night, loading the tables, all that kind of stuff. But this opening in the mailroom, and I thought, I didn't read the New Yorker growing up, and it was really of no use to me because they didn't have photos when I was growing up, and I made a lot of mixtapes. So the magazines that my parents read were like People and stuff like that. Had photos. I needed that for the covers of my mixtapes, and I didn't want these painted illustrations. So the New Yorker was meaningless to me as a kid. Anyway, I thought, well, this is great because it's an indoor job rather than an outdoor job, and you get free coffee because there's coffee machines in the halls. That was really where I was at. But that's how I got into the New Yorker. I started as a messenger in the mailroom, basically. I was an office assistant. I'd fill in for assistants. I'd run errands, did the mail, packages, all that kind of stuff. After 2 years, I became the assistant to the cartoon editor. By that time, though, so when I was in college, my professor was the great Richard Merkin. He's the guy with the purple top hat in the top row of Sgt. Pepper's on the cover.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Yeah, remains a tremendous influence to me, and was my absolute mentor, and helped hook me up with that job, and helped hook my buddy up with his job. But anyway, he saw the writing on the wall for me because, as I meant, I'm not joking. I did spend almost 3 years on one painting at the Rhode Island School of Design. And he said, either you're going to need to find some really wealthy patrons or make a lot of money fast. Or if you're going to be spending 3 years on paintings, you're going to need some other jobs. And I recommend illustration. And I didn't want to illustrate. Yeah. I mean, what artist wants to be told what to draw, how to draw it, and how quickly to do it? So I wanted nothing to do with it. But I felt like I would have wanted his help, to like introduce me to some of the real art world friends. So I'm not going to turn into, he said, why don't you, my former student is the art director at the New Yorker. So I'm still in college. Mm-hmm. Why don't you just draw a couple of characters? Because I was so, I wish I had more, Bruce Stark. I wear these t-shirts sometimes at these shows. The 90s, the caricature t-shirts. I don't know if you remember those, the Salem screen printer shirts.
Oh, yeah.
That guy was my hero. I just wanted to be able to draw like Bruce Stark, honestly. He knew that. He's like, draw a couple of characters in that style. I'll send them to the New Yorker, because if you start illustrating for them, you make a little money. I didn't think anything of it. Never heard anything back. I did. I drew Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, Tori Amos, and Coolio. I spent the day drawing those.
An eclectic bunch.
Yeah, heard nothing. Until I started, maybe a year after I was working there. I guess I was the home run hitter on the softball team. So I kind of made some friends, went out drinking after. Before long, I became friends with that art director. And she said, aren't you the same? I think we have some of your drawings. I think Richard Merkin sent, are these yours? And she pulled out from a flat file those drawings. How'd you like to draw for us? And she gave me a job to draw Hank Williams III when he had his first album out in 99. I turned it down. Wow. I was like, I don't want to be an illustrator. No way. No, thank you. I made a vow in college as a fine artist never to accept money for my services. No way. I thought it would corrupt my soul or something like that. I was 23 years old. The assistant to the art director said, listen, man, like, how much do you get paid pushing around that mail cart? I told him how much per week. And he's like, so is that what you want to do for the rest of your life? You want to like be a mail? You want to do that? Well, no, I want to be a painter. Well, you need money for your art supplies. Draw the picture, take the money, put it towards your art supplies. What are you doing? Do it. You don't have to sell your soul. I'll quote Brady Earnhardt, a great songwriter. Just because you sold don't mean you sold out. And I thought, that's pretty good. So that's how my illustration career started. I just thought, whatever, there's one illustration, but it's sort of like when you're published in the New Yorker, it's sort of like the Mets saying, why don't you take an at bat, and you hit like a home run, everyone else is going to call, whatever, if you're not signed. I don't know. So the next day, the New York Times called, so on. So that's how my career started with illustrations. As far as the cartoons go, yes, I became the assistant to the cartoon editor. So it was my job to weed the pile of submissions that was like this high down to a stack this high so that they can pick 18 a week. I had to be schooled on exactly what makes a cartoon great. Yeah. And so I was tempted to, try it myself. So I started submitting my own cartoons under a different name, Larry Hat I used.
Like Larry Hat, this guy's phenomenal. Everyone's a winner.
And they started buying those. So then I became a cartoonist. And shortly after that, I thought, between the cartoons and the illustrations, I could leave this job. And that's when I hit the road to do the slideshow that I was telling you about. and I put out a book called Drawings and Other Failures. It was a little book about this big, and it had basically the stage show. It had like all the lyrics and all the pictures, and that's what I would leave behind, like a musician leaves an album. And again, back to this sort of lifelong passion to tie mechanically reproduced imagery into the release of my work. So I was also a huge Norman Rockwell fan as a kid. And what I liked more about Norman Rockwell than his ability to paint and the stories that he told was that he was using mechanically reproduced imagery to reach mainstream America with his art. And that is what I always thought was also missing from the art world. And so to put out these little books, you know, it's like, hey, you want to have an exhibit with the original art in a gallery? Cool. That's like a concert. But what are you going to give the people so that they can open it at 3 a.m. when they need it? Maybe like if you have a broken heart, you want to listen to Frank Sinatra sing songs for the only lonely. You might not be able to go really quick, go to Vegas and see him sing. So where's the thing? So that's what I always wanted. So with the Topps cards, on the one hand, it's fun to paint baseball cards. I love painting baseball cards, but also pulling out a little bit, it's also for me as a fine artist, it's my dream of reaching the mainstream with my art, forget what the subject is, through the mechanically reproduced imagery. So, you know, all those things kind of play into it for me. And I guess that's kind of, you know, that story in a nutshell.
Well, it's incredible, man. And I mean, how cool that you sort of have, you know, like I said, zigged and zagged, but, you know, you're always making it work. And it's sort of like you're building these relationships and, you know, those turn into this cool relationship that ends up leading to a job, you know, like, and I think that's part about being artistic, right? Is that you're letting your creativity speak for itself, and that path will sort of present itself where and when it should. And it sounds like, you know, it's worked out so far for you.
You know, not to cut you off, but another reason why I got into the New Yorker cartoons too is because I was just starting to like want to write country songs. And I thought it would be a really good practice because it's about saying the most with the fewest strokes. And each little caption is like a little, you know, how much can you say in one little line? So a lot of exercises in simplicity, but
I love it. No, that's awesome. And yeah, to your point, like a lot of those cartoons are a sentence or less, right? And then the image, and that's what you get. And that's your medium. And some of them speak, I mean, huge volumes, the point that they can make. Well, that's really cool. So you had mentioned Topps, obviously, and that's how you and I have met. You know, I got a chance to meet you at the National, and we had a wonderful conversation, and you know, was exposed to your work and stuff. But how did that sort of original Spotlight project come together?
I toured between the slideshow and my music career, you know, about 10 years on the road. And there were years when I was doing 100 shows a year.
Wow.
And keeping up what grew into an extremely demanding illustration deadline schedule. So I was touring with a 5-piece band and all of my illustration equipment in the truck. And as soon as we load into a city, I'd, you know, go into the motel, set up a studio, because after the show, I'd have to draw like the president of the United States for the New York Times, mostly like hungover, fingers still bleeding, you know, from pounding the strings of the honky tonk guitar. So I had to keep up that deadline schedule on the road as a musician. Did most of my illustrations from hotel rooms. After 10 years, I mean, honestly, I broke. I burnt out. I broke. I got carpal tunnel in both my hands. I couldn't draw the way I always could. I watched Superman 2 a lot. You know, like, wow, now I'm just a mere mortal. Like, I've lost my superpowers. Who am I? You know, to embrace, well, like kind of what I learned as a musician is like, well, look, maybe your hands are never going to get better. Maybe you're never going to be able to paint in the way that you could, or draw in the way you could. So what can you do? So what was I going to draw? I went back to my youth. I went back to the subject that was the most safe and familiar to me, was drawing baseball cards again. But this time around, I didn't want to draw the superstars because I've had enough drawing superstars. It's all I did as an illustrator, with an art director looking over my shoulder saying, fix the nose, fix the face. But if I'm drawing like Champ Summers and Rick Peters and, you know, unknown common players from this old box of baseball cards, not that I'm showing anyone these pictures anyway, but even for me, I don't have to worry that it's like, that doesn't look like Dave Winfield. That's not what it was about for me. It was about drawing. It was about learning how to have fun again, drawing, and not caring what the result was. So with all due respect to those fantastic players, it was easier to draw lesser known players just for me, just because like I could just whatever. I ended up doing a piece about that for the New Yorker. It's called Loneliness of the Common Player. And it's a sort of, I think that was in 2015. It was just about, that story, why I like drawing lesser known baseball players. At the same time, or shortly after, I met Scott Rogowski. Of course, Scott from Trivia HQ and from Fanatics Live and eBay. My brother's a comedian and a writer. He was working with Scott a long time before that. So through my brother, I met Scott. It was at my brother's birthday party. I think I was wearing a Willie McGee powder blue jersey, and he might have been wearing like Pete Rose on the Expos. We both, bonded over the love of the obscure players and the deep cut, jerseys. And I pointed him to this article because I thought he'd dig it. I didn't realize he used to work at Topps. He's like, we should get a tour for you. Would you like to come and tour the? Are you kidding me? That would be incredible. I mean, the New Yorker's one thing, but Topps is like, that's a whole other thing. I'm addicted to that since I'm a kid. Oh my God. It just kind of year after year, that intro kind of never happened. It was too difficult to coordinate schedules with Topps. Plus it wasn't booming, and after a while, it was like, Topps, there's kind of like, got to put a pin in that. They're laying a lot of people off. It's just, this is in 2019, maybe at this point. I thought, you know what? It's probably not going to happen. That's this tour. Then the pandemic hit, and then the boom happened. And then I started getting, I always kept my cards, but I wasn't like actively going to card shows for like, 20 years before that boom. So I started getting back into it. My brother was always into it. So suddenly we're talking about cards again. I know Scott was into it. And we start talking, and I'm like, you know what? Like, what's going on with Topps? Are they booming too? Because I know the last time we spoke, it's not what was happening. He said, it's actually a great time to connect you because they're doing this thing called Project 70 they just did Project 2020.
Right.
They're looking for artists to do reimagine all the great cards from their 70 years. Why don't I put you in touch? And he did. Got a meeting with the great Jeff Heckman, and I think who that was like his project. How'd you like to draw a really famous, like reimagine a legendary card for us? I said, well, I'm really flattered. This sounds great, but I kind of want to draw like 1979 Lee Mazzilli. That's your legacy also. Can I be the guy that draws the shoebox cards? And they like that idea so much, they gave me a complete set. And that's how Spotlight70 was born.
That's so cool. So, it's fascinating how that came to be, right? And again, like following your passion, building on relationships, like that has all culminated in this success. But I'm curious, you'd mentioned you're a classically trained artist, oil paintings, you spent years on a single painting. Your Spotlight cards are very different from that. They're ink and watercolors. Can you tell us a little bit about your process and how that came to be for these types of cards and pieces?
Well, it came to be, like I explained, because I was breaking down.
Yeah.
So if you're going to break down, just break down. This is the first time now that I put the perfectionism aside to become a musician. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wow, look at me. This is the total opposite side of, being Vermeer. Mm-hmm. I never did that in visual art. Even if you look back at my earliest, baseball cards that I drew as a kid, you see light pencil lines first. I always wanted to get it right. But now it's like, we're just free falling here. My hand hurts too much to even lift a dish when it's time to clear the plates of dinner. So you're just going to do what you did with music and fail. And just, what's the medium? I always heard ink and watercolor was the most difficult medium, but I always laughed at that as an oil painter. I thought that was like too provincial, like watercolors for kids. That's just kids stuff. Oh, it's the most difficult medium, they'd always say, because you can't lie. You can't hide from the truth. You can't cover up. You can't change your mistakes. You can't rewind time. Like I said about the oil painting, you can. You could do all that. So Michelangelo burned all his stuff at the end of his life because he didn't want people to know that it didn't come out full blown from the head of Zeus. So I thought, well, why don't I do that? No pencils. Let's just dive right in and let whatever's happening happen, just like I did as a musician. That's how that started happening. And it's not the kind of thing where you're going to labor over it for years and years. It has to be fast. Ideally. I mean, there's techniques where it's a bit more of a slow process. If you look at James Fiorentino's work, he's using watercolor in a different way, a little more time consuming. Andrew Wyeth used dry brush, also more time consuming. I'm not doing that. I'm just letting it spill fast. So the most common question anyone asks me at shows is, how long does it take each one to paint? And my answer at this point is somewhere between how long it took George Gershwin to play Rhapsody in Blue and Philippe Petit to tightrope across the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center without a net. And so, the real question, actually, Steve Carlton asked me that question when I gave him the 1979 card I painted in the Spotlight 2 for him backstage at the Philly show. And I said, that's the most popular question. How long does it take you to throw your nastiest pitch? And he goes, oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
As an artist, or even an athlete, you don't get paid by the hour. It's about mastery.
Yep.
And so if it takes me 5 minutes, believe me, it's way more difficult to embrace that level of imperfection than spend 3 years creating the illusion of perfection.
Sure.
So
totally.
So I mean, that's the story with those. But yeah, I mean, I did all 135 cards in that last set. They gave me 40 days.
Wow.
That was the insane artistic experience I've practically ever had.
It's hard having pressure and your feet held to a deadline like that as an artist. I mean, my career has been built. I've been trained traditionally in art and stuff, but I've always leaned more into the commercial side as far as like graphic design and things like that. But to your point, like when you have to come up with whether it's a new campaign or a logo or whatever, and you're on a deadline, creative juices don't flow quite as well as they normally do. So that is impressive that you got what you did out in the time frame. I get,
you just have to make them flow.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm not going to sit here and say I wasn't feeling it like I was.
Yeah.
But yes, on a deadline. But that's sort of the challenge, is like to care.
Forced flow.
Yeah. As an illustrator, I was a machine. My emotion was not involved.
Yeah.
People would say, I like your art. And I would almost be offended if they were talking about my illustrations. I'd say, that's not my art.
Yeah.
Like, well, why would you say that? I was like, why would you say that? Yes, it is. I said, no, I'm the artist. Trust me, it's not. I'm providing an artistic service. That's a different thing. This is not an assignment. Spotlight's not an assignment.
Yeah.
It's almost like Topps is my record label for a visual artist, and it's a beautiful collaboration, but this is not an assignment. So yeah, there's a deadline, but imagine how excited it would be if Columbia Records was like, we'll give you 40 days to make an album. Yeah, so I put my heart and soul into it, and then it's just about how am I gonna do this? But it was so exciting, but totally grueling.
It's really cool. So I'm curious, they give you a tight deadline. Were they strict about the selection process and what you had to do, or was that up to you, or was that a collaborative effort?
Up to me entirely on the first 2 sets.
Okay.
And I don't think they pushed back on anything. Most beautiful collaboration I've ever had. I mean, as an illustrator, that's not the relationship I had. I'm not pitching illustrations. Right. They're coming to me and they're saying, draw this, do that. We want to, yeah. This is a totally different thing. I never felt so supported, as a creative individual. It's like anything I wanted to do, I was able to do. I curated, I picked all the cards in the first 2 sets, all of it. For the 3rd set, the most recent Spotlight Baseball, they were like, would it be fun if we picked the cards? And I thought, actually, that would be fun, because it's like being handed a shoebox.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite thing. You start digging through it, and it's like, what am I going to get?
Totally.
I said, and not only is it like, it's Topps. So it's so funny when they say that, is the design okay on the back of this, or is this okay? I'm like, it's your Topps. Everything's always been okay. Even if there's an error, like, leave it. It's great. Wow. Terrific. Like, it's great. So I surprised them with all the short print variants. Those were mine. They didn't even know those were coming. So those were mine. They picked all the cards this year. They thought it would also be fun. I only painted more obscure, more obscure players and not contemporary, all retired players in the first two sets.
Yep.
And if I was going to put a legend in there, it was like Roger Maris, he's wearing a Cardinals uniform, not a Yankees uniform. So that was always my thing. I remember getting to meet Andre Dawson at one of these shows, and I'm introduced as Topps artist, and he painted you and his face when I handed him the card, he's on the Marlins. He was like, why did you paint me on the Marlins? But the Topps thought, it'd be kind of cool, actually. Why don't we paint contemporary stars too, and iconic rookies? So I got to paint, it was great for them to decide that I should paint the George Brett rookie and the Ricky Henderson rookie and Mattingly 84 and all these great cards. So, and not to mention the new cards, and painting like Topps Now cards of Gunnar Henderson's first home run and the Shohei Ohtani. I got to paint one of the first Shohei Ohtani on the Dodgers for Topps that has ever been issued.
Wow. It's
not the first. I'm not, you got to check on that, but it's one of the first. Well, it couldn't have been the first because I painted a card that already existed. So I painted the Topps Now card of him getting signed to the Dodgers.
Probably the first art card of him in a Dodgers.
Probably. But although, I don't want to make it. One of.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was so much fun to have them pick it. I loved it. And plus they gave me like refractors. I wouldn't have thought to paint a refractor. So some of those cards, when I brought in the originals, I painted it to look like a refractor. People ask, how do you do that? I hold every card in my hand when I paint it. So actually right here, these are all the cards from Spot. Oh, hey, look at that right there. These are all the cards.
Oh, there you go.
From the Spotlight. So I save all the actual cards I have in my hand, and then I rubber stamp them, used by artists as reference. I sign them 1 of 1. So I have from all 3 sets the actual cards. The refractors, it's a moving phenomenon. So I thought, well, if you go to eBay and someone's selling a refractor, they capture it in
still image
dimensionally, so I painted those images. I went to eBay and painted the 2-dimensional images. But I still held those cards and got some ink on it and whatever. So they're also stamped. But that's how I handled those refractors. But when I went in to bring it to stamp all the originals and sign them in the office, I gave them some of those refractors, and they were actually bending it in the light. I'm like, no, that's it's not gonna refract. So I felt proud of the magic that I was able to.
But there are some hollow cards in that set, though, right? They did do some printing on metallic.
Every card in all the sets has 5 versions of itself as a foil.
Okay.
Yeah. In this latest set, there are, I think, each card has 3 versions as a foil, and they also have gold foil 1 of 1s, and that's also interesting. It's been to watch the eBay response, the secondary market they've essentially, speaking of folk music, they created a John Henry story where they're pitting the value of a hand painted original 1 of 1 issued by Topps with a checklist on the back versus the gold foil version, which is a 1 of 1 with a checklist on the back. And it's really interesting to see, some of the collections. I saw the Gunnar Henderson original for the Topps Now when it first hit. It was they listed it for $1,000 or something. And then when someone pulled the gold 1 of 1, it's still up there for $4,999. This is it's kind of funny, to see how people value a manufactured 1 of 1 versus a hand painted.
Yeah.
But I've actually anonymously reached out to some of the dealers that sold the originals. In some cases, less than the price that they sold the 1 of 10 versions printed on canvas stock. And said, did you realize that was an original painting? Because the description didn't really. And they would say things like, no, that was an exclusive print. I said, no, that I'm pretty sure that's the original painting that you sold. And then they realized they would, and they'd write back oh my God, I gotta hunt down that person. I can't believe I sold it for that. But that's been the interesting thing about it. This has never been done before.
Right.
Topps did a really cool thing here by issuing, this complete set of original paintings with a checklist on the back. It's a little baffling for some, but hey, that's what this space is all about too. Not getting it at first.
Yeah, and collectors are fickle and strange, right? Like, let's be honest. There's all these like intricacies, and to your point, people like different things. But I can tell you that I've got one of this is the Bobby Witt that you did. This is an original painting, and I cherish this in my art card collection. And that's not going anywhere, man. But your work is awesome, and I feel honored that I was able to make a little trade with some cards and cash, which was awesome, man.
Yeah, cool.
So I appreciate that. But no, it's just so cool. And what's cool about it, not only is the artist that obviously you're getting paid to do all this, but the reception from the public. I mean, your last Spotlight Baseball series set on top sold out in 7 minutes or something like that. Crazy.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, I've heard less, but yeah, but between 5 and 7.
Okay,
it was crazy. It was crazy. That was crazy. Yeah,
it's amazing. Well, it's really cool. And so with all the success, is there something you can share with us brewing maybe for the future, or not yet, or what's going on there?
Oh, no, I mean, no, there's nothing I could share, but the future is long. So I can't imagine the collaboration ending with the grand finale of Spotlight Baseball.
Yeah.
But hey.
No, it'll keep going on, and who knows, maybe there's other sports you could venture into too. I mean, I'm a huge basketball guy. I know you did that Star Jordan. That was a really cool piece, but maybe there's a future with some of these other sports too for you.
Hey, who knows? But I mean, I love collaborating with Topps, and I've loved meeting all the collectors. I've loved going to all the shows. I mean, it's really it's thanks to the enthusiasm of the collectors really that I don't illustrate anymore. Really, the collectors that delivered my dream as a fine artist, which is to paint what you want and have collectors support that. That's what's happened here. Yeah. And, I really I have the collectors to thank. I'm so grateful and touched, but it's also freed me from having to take assignment work, which means I got more time to, just paint whatever I want.
Yeah.
Like I did, like I did this the other day.
Chewy. That's awesome.
I did this the other day. Just whatever. So
I like it. Maybe that's the next set, the eclectic set. I love those, man. That's awesome. Can't go wrong with Star Wars or He-Man. I mean, that's the childhood coming back for sure.
It's fun. I mean, I see these cards at card shows, and they might be like a whole long, dollar bin, and it's parted like the Red Sea, and I'm passing by it and I'll see it and I'll just stop and be like, that I'll take it, and I just paint it. I don't ask myself if I should paint it. If I want to, I do. Awesome. I always call them, they're like little landscapes to me.
Yeah.
Familiar landscapes.
Yeah.
And they're a common landscape because, this He-Man card, whatever it means to me, it also means something to other people. So when you paint it in a way that is emotional, it's going to draw in a collector for reasons more than just the subject.
Yeah.
It really means a lot to me when a collector, let's say, who's not really even, someone who studies art or goes to museums or galleries, and they'll say things like, there's just so much vulnerability in the work, just picking up on the delivery, that means a lot to me, because I see myself as almost like a jazz pianist doing my interpretation of the American popular standard that the card is,
I love it.
So
yeah,
it's been a really fun, really interesting way to commune through art with people of all walks.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. That's really cool. So are people, obviously there's a commercial side to all of this, right? I know that you're a passionate artist, but are people able to reach out to you and, like you just showed off, like the Chewy or the He-Man, is there a place that they can find some of those? Can they only find you at trade shows? How could they maybe get a hold of you or, purchase something like that?
Yeah, the trade shows are always a good bet, but I've just started selling pretty exclusively through my brother. My brother's a big seller on eBay. The Rotation Zone.
Okay.
So if you go to the Rotation Zone And I'm gonna link that. I'll link that through my site, of course, if you go to my shop. But he's got a lot of exclusive stuff up there right now, and I just keep funneling stuff to him.
All right.
Yeah,
We'll make sure to put that in the show notes and stuff so people can find that one, because that's awesome. Because like I said, like, you know, it was so fun at the National to sit down with you, because you had like a box of all your original work, and it's like, dude, there's some amazing pieces in here that the public wouldn't see. So,
right.
You know, between what you put out and in this rotation zone,
Exactly.
That's good for people to know, because you're doing just amazing stuff, Andy.
Thanks, man. I mean, I appreciate that. I really do. It's very special.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, I want to be appreciative and respect your time. But, you know, I always like to ask each one of my guests, you know, as we near this sort of time together coming to an end, do you have any advice to, in this case, aspiring artists, that sort of one golden rule that you could give them?
Yeah. I like to use the horse racing analogy. Like, you want to have blinders. You don't want to be looking this way and that way. You want to make sure you're in peak shape, whatever that means to you. I mean peak creative shape. Do everything you can to make sure that you're flowing and open to yourself and inspiring yourself. And you want to take care of you want to treat yourself like an athlete in a certain way, because, like, look, if you break your body, you're not going to be able to do what you can do. So yeah, I honestly, like, stay positive and never let anyone tell you that you're doing something that people aren't going to like. Don't try to please the audience. You gotta just be relentless about pleasing yourself and staying at it. Have a thick skin, stay at it. Just like running to first base. Don't look at the ball. It only slows you down. So don't look there's no competition. People always say, hey, what are you, competition? There's no competition. And they say, what a big-headed thing to say. No, I mean it. There's no competition. If you're not competing, then there's no competition. I recommend not competing.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's really important, you know, I mean, especially myself, you know, trying to start some art card brand and bring stuff. I'm trying to do just what you're saying, right? And be passionate about the pieces that I'm creating. And I hope that other people like it, right? And I think it's so important, because also I think a side effect of that is that you're being genuine, like we talked about earlier, right? And opening yourself up and showing who you are. And that's what is really going to differentiate you, right? Because a lot of these subject matter wise have been done before, right? It's not like nobody has done something with baseball cards before. Nobody's done anything with Star Wars cards before, things like that. But it's your style and your vision that make that so unique. And in your case, obviously, you know, the ink and watercolors and what you've created has been, you know, just really, really special, and people enjoy it.
Thank you. Well, this is awesome. Yeah. I mean, never give up.
Yeah.
Never give up. And that if you reduce the fractions,
never give up. That's awesome. Well, hey, before I let you go, Andy, I'm just curious. Obviously, we talked about people check out the rotation zone on eBay. You know, I'll pull it up here again, but not everybody's watching. So if you're listening, you can find Andy on Instagram at Sunday Friedman, or his website, andyfriedman.net. Are there any other sort of shows or events that you have upcoming in the next few months to kick off 2025 that you want to share with people?
Well, by the time this airs, I guess I will have had a great time at the Philly show this coming weekend.
Totally.
So it was nice to see everyone there, and thank you for stopping by. Yeah, check the website, andyfriedman.net. I'll list them all. But the answer is, I just don't know exactly where right now. Sometimes it happens all at the last minute. I'll just,
totally. Nothing wrong like with last minute, man. Sometimes that's always the best stuff, right? But
yeah, and that's why we like the rotation zone, because it's a permanent card show, really. So
love it. That's awesome. Well, Andy, this has been a great conversation, and you have just an amazing story. So I can't thank you enough for taking the time to share it with us. It's really been inspiring, and I'm impressed to see where your creative passions have taken you, you know, like you said, from the, music to the writing, to the cartoons, to now the artists, that you've become with Tops. It's really, like I said, just inspiring. And I appreciate you sharing it with us. So I want to wish you, your family, a happy holiday season. And I'm excited to see what's in store for you for 2025, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Zach. It's been great to get to know you, and thanks for the provocative questions and the great questions.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on as a guest.
Of course. Well, be well, man. And hopefully I'll catch you sooner at the show, man. Have a good one.
Yep. You too.
Everybody watching, thank you for taking time. I hope that you learned something new or found some inspiration. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and of course, share with your friends. And remember, keep collecting, keep hustling, and we'll see you next week on Hobby Hustle, where collecting, passion, and business collide. Thanks so much.
Hobby Hustle is brought to you by Collector Creative. If you're a collectible brand or company looking for help with marketing, branding, design, or development, head over to collectorcreative.com and drop Zach a line. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, connect with us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at collector_creative. And be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time on Hobby Hustle, where collecting, passion, and business collide.